Shabbat Shalom. Biblical times, age of Joshua, you are walking through the forest, going out to gather some wood, and you've got your hatchet and you are happily swinging it down the trail, and suddenly the head of the hatchet flies off. And just at that moment, coming around the bend, comes your best friend in the whole world. The axe hits him in the head, thunk, he drops dead. What do? Run to the city of refuge, the Ir Miklat, right? You run to the city of refuge. Why? Well, because he's dead. And that makes you at least a manslaughterer, and at worst, perhaps a murderer. As there are no witnesses around, there's going to be an inquest, if you will. But in the meantime, the Goel Hadam, the blood avenger, some other relative of his family, may be thinking that this was premeditated a murder, and that you are a murderer, and he will try to catch you. If he catches you outside the city, no harm, no foul. Well, harm to you, but it's no foul to him. Once you're in the city, you are safe, and then there can be a proper inquest. And what is the answer going to be in a case like this? It's an accident. And what is one of the defining reasons why we know it's not murder? No enmity. Or you might even say, you didn't have an axe to grind. Because you had no history of animosity, of enmity with this person, indeed, like I said, he was your best friend, the general finding will be that this was an unfortunate, tragic accident. There might or might not be some discussion about your casual swinging of a hatchet, but even that would probably in this situation not be considered a willful negligence that contributed to the death, because after all, how often do you expect the axe head to go flying from just a casual swoop? Same situation, same person going down the road, swinging the axe flies off and around from that corner, unseen by you before that axe was in the air, it is your worst enemy. The axe hits the guy, he dies, you run to the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge. What is the likely outcome of this going to be? You're probably going to be considered a murderer. The enmity that you shared with this person, assuming it was bidirectional, is probably going to be considered enough to seal your guilt as having done this willfully. After all, the two of you are alone in the woods. Who's to say that you didn't just walk up to him and go with the axe? Oh, we're taking your word for it that you just so happened to be cursed by your axe head to go flying at just the wrong moment, to hit just by pure chance the guy you hated most in life? Yeah, right. You are guilty, my friend, of murder. What is one of, yes?
Pretty strong circumstantial, but don't you need witnesses?
Don't you need witnesses? Yes, and usually we do. But for a case like this where it is considered to be so prima facie obvious that you are the guilty party because of your enmity towards the victim, the Torah seems to be pointing to the fact that maybe in this case your hostility is testimony enough against you, which should lead you to a very obvious conclusion. Don't have enemies. It's just not smart. If you have enemies and one of them happens to drop dead and you're nearby, you're going to be under suspicion. Indeed, the Tosafot goes so far as to say, the medieval commentators, that if you have to rank in priority, watching out for people trying to harm you and watching out for you not to harm other people, you should put number 2, number 1. You should watch out for what potential harm you may cause to another more than you watch out for those that might be harming you. You have 2 questions to ask each day. Is someone trying to get me? And am I in a place where I might cause harm to another? And the Tosafot say, you want to rank those as, am I in a place where I might cause harm to another first? And then, yes, also watch out to make sure no one's trying to get you. But this is the biblical time. We haven't had the Arei Miklat, we haven't had the cities of refuge for a very long time. You're in 1400s Poland. You are walking through the forest, your axe goes flying, it is a complete accident, you hit someone. What do? Assuming they are a member of the Jewish community. There's no city of refuge to run to. How do you handle it? Well, what are some of the options? Don't tell me that this is what you think you should do, but just what are some options? Go to the rabbi. Rabbi, you'll never guess what happened. I was out in the woods, the axe, it happened, it's tragedy. Option number one, go to your rabbi. Option number two, what? Call your lawyer. I don't know exactly how many lawyers were practicing in 1400s Poland, but get legal advice from someone else, because you might want to go to the local authorities. Right? I mean, no, we don't want to go to the local Polish authorities or whoever was in charge of that bit of Poland that century, because it kept changing back and forth. Why not? You're considered guilty by walking in by virtue of being a Jew, let alone what you say after you open your mouth. And to be fair, that went for most people. The various authorities, the lords and their apparatus of domination, didn't care so much of the niceties of justice by and large. And there's a very real possibility that you or anyone, Jew or non-Jew, would not exactly get a fair trial in such a case. Which leads to option number three. Bury the body and run away. Right, John? I'm out of here. I'm not going to talk about this to anyone. I'm going to hide the evidence, and this is it. And who's going to walk through the forest and find this, right? And if they do, how will they pin it to me? There's no DNA evidence or anything. That would be option number three of, I'm in deep trouble, and I just need to pretend like this never happened. As we know from Quasimodo, sanctuary, get yourself onto church property and they won't kick you out, more or less. That wasn't always as inviolate as it seems in the movies, but that was an option within Christian Europe. But let's imagine for a moment that you either hide the remains or you go to your rabbi, because you're not going to trust yourself in the hands of the local authorities. And it was a pure accident, right? No malice, no murder. This really was just tragic. You're done? The rabbi says, it's okay, my son. Accidents happen. Go on your way. Go back to your family. Just say no more about this. What about the emotional component of knowing you have caused someone's death? That because of you, even if it was purely accidental, someone else is now gone. Well, our tradition actually does deal with this question in quite a lot of detail. Different commentators throughout the Middle Ages wondered, how will you deal with this? For accidents happened in their communities. And there was no city of refuge for a person to take refuge in, not just for the possibility of an inquest, but in many cases, as we read this morning, they would stay there until the Kohen Gadol would pass away, and then that would be considered amnesty, and then they could be released. It was almost as a de facto prison for those that were negligent in the homicide. What do you do in Europe? Well, there are three main strains of approach, of how a person should respond from having caused a tragedy like this, from which they can receive no punishment from the secular authorities for fear of them being disproportionate and deadly, and for which there is no innate Jewish response, because our response was predicated around having cities of refuge in the land of Israel. Option number one, self-punishment. I did something wrong. I don't trust the non-Jews to punish me fairly. The Jewish authorities don't have authority to actually punish me because they're denied that authority by the non-Jewish king. Therefore, I will punish myself. I will fast. Boy, was this popular. I will fast on Mondays and Thursdays. I will fast for a month. That means daytime hours. I will fast constantly or with no meat and no wine ever again for the rest of my life. I will now only sleep on the floor. I will sleep without a pillow. I will lie down on the floor outside of the synagogue so that the other congregants, when leaving, can walk past me or over me, literally on top of me, as a form of self-punishment, of flagellation for my sins. I'm not seeing a lot of love for these answers. No? Well, good, because you're good Jewish people, because most of these answers are not actually Jewish answers. They don't find antecedents of this within prior generations of rabbinic writings. It seems to become a cross-fertilization of imagination, if you will, from the excessive forms of Christian piety that led to them also talking about these types of acts as a form of penance, as something that the priest would tell you to do through the confessional. But, you know, it's catchy. It kind of makes some sort of psychological, emotional sense that if I've done something wrong, I should be harmed in some way. My life should be made miserable. So, unfortunately, in many communities, it kind of caught on. And these types of penance became very commonplace as a tikkun, as a remedy for any crime that you might do. Not only for manslaughter, but for others as well. But this is the Jewish world. There are other voices. Yes?
What about if you feel like you're punished? You go out of your way to special misconduct, especially for the family of the person you want. Even if you do it in such a way that they don't know you're doing it. Make their life better.
Option number 3. 2, 3, depending upon which list in my head I'm reading off of. You don't punish yourself. You don't add damage to the world. You add blessing to the world. You find ways to actually make a contribution to the world, specifically in honor of the deed that you had done. Whether it be helping the family that you have deprived of this person, or whether it be helping someone else in the world. The rabbis were very big on supporting the orphans, for example, as being a very appropriate tit for tat. For as it says in the Talmud, one who takes one life, it is as though they have destroyed the entire world. And one who saves a life, it is as though they have saved the entire world. There's a very nice harmony there, that if I have taken one life, thus destroying a world, if I save a life, and the lives of the orphans were the most vulnerable in our history, then it is as though I am saving a whole world with that person as well. So, taking care of the orphans or doing other acts of tzedakah were incredibly common as being recommended in many different situations. Saying the Kaddish and observing the yahrzeit on the day of that person's death as being a reminder and a contribution to that life. Which brings to mind option number 3, which is fix yourself. So there is hurt yourself, fix the world, and fix yourself. That is to say, improve your character. This is sort of built around the idea that there is some underlying flaw that led you to be in a position where this sort of thing could happen. Yes, some accidents are completely accidental and random, but most accidents, like our guy swinging the axe down the walkway, have an element where you have contributed to their possibility. It's why so many people get irate when you talk about traffic accidents, when 99.9% of traffic accidents were created by someone behaving outside the correct parameters of good driving. Yes, there are the occasional times where your wheels just fall off the car and then the accident happens, but most of the time, something that you or someone else did contributed to that moment. And the rabbis were very, very keen that we take a tragedy like this, not just as an opportunity to beat ourselves, not just as an opportunity to do good in the world, but as an opportunity to reflect upon ourselves and see what is there for improvement. Courses of study, of reading certain sections of the Torah, of Jewish law, of reading from the Psalms, acts of great piety, of humility, to try and humble oneself, guidance of how we should interact with others. Perhaps we were too arrogant, too casual, too caught up in ourselves, that we didn't recognize the danger we posed to someone else. The rabbis were strong advocates of seeing every tragedy as an opportunity for improving oneself, not to fester guilt, not to make us neurotic, but to recognize that at any moment we have the capacity, the potential to do better than we did. And that with that capacity comes the responsibility to do so. Now, none of these acts, nor those in the biblical time, can bring back a person from the dead. We do not have the capacity to undo the true damage that was done. We have some ability to mitigate the damage that was done and to prevent further damage, however. As I mentioned at the beginning, the Tosafot argued that this should teach us that we must place as in our priorities that we do no harm to others at the top of the list. And that we recognize that through our negligence, through our casualness, through our arrogance, through just our ignorance, that we have the potential for doing great harm to many other people. Some that we see up close, some that are farther away. Thanks to our wonderful international global society, we have the capacity now, in the comfort of our own homes, to make life miserable for people around the world. It's an amazing power, and one that we must consider. Am I behaving in a way that removes harm from as many people as possible? Or am I behaving in a way that increases the harm to them? Am I being negligent? Am I allowing my ignorance to be my cover for causing harm? There are no cities of refuge to run to. There is no way to bring a person back from the dead. But we have the capacity to give life to others, to protect their life, and to better the lives of ourselves. No one has ever suffered from having learned more. No one has ever suffered from having made themselves into a better person. No one has ever had any harm come to their head because they chose to live better tomorrow than they are today. Looking out for others does not make you weak. It does not make you a sucker. It makes you the hero that our people are meant to be. Shabbat Shalom.